Writing. The morning began with the sound of a little boy trying not to cry, but failing anyway. His tiny hands clung desperately to his father's worn jacket while strangers hurried past without noticing that two hearts were quietly breaking in the middle of a crowded train. Before the day was over, a woman who controlled billion-dollar companies would accidentally fall asleep on that exhausted father's shoulder, and neither of them would realize that the briefest moment of human kindness was about to rewrite both of their lives forever. If you are watching Broken Smile, and you believe that hope, compassion, and second chances can change a person's life, please take a moment to like this story, leave a heartfelt comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe so more emotional stories can reach people who need hope. The single father was named Rowan Mercer, a 34-year-old carpenter whose hands carried permanent scars from years of building homes for other families while struggling to hold together his own. 4 years earlier, his wife had passed away after a sudden illness that left him alone with his 6-year-old son, Orion. Every sunrise became another battle against unpaid bills, sleepless nights, and the quiet fear that he was never enough. Rowan rarely complained because his son believed fathers were supposed to be unbreakable. Every morning he smiled even when his heart felt heavier than the tool bag resting on his shoulder. Orion had inherited his mother's bright imagination but also her fragile health, requiring regular hospital visits that forced Rowan to miss work more often than he could afford. Every missed paycheck pushed them closer to losing the tiny apartment they called home, yet Rowan refused to let despair steal the warmth from the little life depending entirely on him. Across the city, another soul carried invisible wounds beneath expensive clothing. Her name was Celine Ardent, the 38-year-old chief executive of a global technology company admired for transforming struggling businesses into industry leaders. Newspapers praised her intelligence, discipline, and relentless ambition, but none of them knew that success had become the wall she built after years of betrayal. Her father had sacrificed family for power, teaching her that emotions were weaknesses waiting to be exploited. Relationships ended because she never allowed anyone close enough to truly know her. Employees respected her, competitors feared her, and investors celebrated her victories, yet every evening she returned to a luxurious penthouse where silence echoed louder than applause. Sleep rarely visited her, and when it did, it lasted only minutes before another nightmare reminded her how lonely success could become. That afternoon, sunlight reflected softly across the city as Rowan and Orion boarded a nearly full commuter train after another exhausting hospital appointment. The doctor had delivered hopeful news, but the medication would cost more than Rowan had expected. He counted the remaining cash in his wallet several times, pretending the numbers might somehow increase. Orion rested his head against his father's arm, drained from the long day. Rowan stood because every seat was occupied, gently rocking with the movement of the train while trying to hide his own exhaustion. His body begged for rest after working overnight on a construction project before rushing to the hospital at dawn. At the next station, Celine entered with 2 assistants following behind, though she quietly dismissed them before they could accompany her further. She needed a rare moment away from meetings, cameras, and expectations. Her eyes revealed the fatigue she carefully concealed during boardroom presentations. Finding only one narrow space beside Rowan, she stood silently, holding the overhead rail while the train rolled through the bright afternoon streets. Neither noticed the other beyond a polite glance. They were simply 2 strangers carrying burdens too heavy to explain. Minutes passed as the gentle rhythm of the train mixed with warm sunlight filtering through large windows. Celine's body finally surrendered to weeks of relentless exhaustion. Her grip slowly loosened, her eyelids closed without permission, and before she realized what was happening, her head gently rested against Rowan's shoulder. The crowded passengers looked up in surprise, recognizing the famous executive from countless magazine covers. Some reached for their phones, expecting Rowan to react with embarrassment or annoyance. Instead, he remained perfectly still. He noticed the deep shadows beneath her eyes and the quiet trembling in her breathing. Something told him that this woman, despite everything she possessed, had not truly rested in a very long time. He adjusted his posture carefully so she would not wake suddenly, allowing a stranger to borrow the comfort he himself desperately needed. Orion looked up at the sleeping woman with innocent curiosity before quietly smiling. Children often recognize sadness adults spend years hiding. Rowan gently placed his jacket between Celine's head and his shoulder to make her more comfortable. He expected nothing in return. Compassion had become his last remaining wealth. Nearly 40 minutes later, the train slowed near Celine's destination. She awoke abruptly, confused by the unfamiliar warmth supporting her. Realizing she had fallen asleep on a stranger's shoulder, embarrassment flooded her usually composed expression. She apologized repeatedly, but Rowan simply offered a tired smile that carried no judgment. Before stepping off the train, Celine noticed Orion waving goodbye with cheerful innocence. That tiny gesture lingered in her thoughts long after the train disappeared from sight. For reasons she could not explain, Celine instructed her driver to remain parked while she watched the departing train disappear into the distance. All afternoon she found herself distracted during executive meetings. Financial reports blurred before her eyes because she kept remembering the quiet kindness of a man who had every reason to reject inconvenience yet chose patience instead. Nobody had shown her such simple humanity in years without expecting something in return. Days later, fate quietly arranged another meeting. Heavy daytime rain forced Rowan and Orion into a neighborhood community center where free meals were being distributed to struggling families after severe flooding damaged several nearby homes. Celine had anonymously funded the relief program through her company and arrived unexpectedly to inspect operations without announcing her identity. As volunteers moved between crowded tables, she recognized Rowan helping elderly residents carry supplies before serving food to children despite receiving assistance himself. Even while facing hardship, he naturally placed others before himself. Watching unnoticed from across the room, Celine experienced something unfamiliar. The man she assumed needed saving was already saving everyone around him through ordinary acts of compassion. Wealth had taught her to solve problems with money, but Rowan reminded her that true generosity often begins with exhausted hands willing to help despite having almost nothing. Curiosity gradually became friendship through carefully arranged volunteer events and accidental encounters that felt increasingly intentional. Celine learned about Orion's dreams of becoming an architect who designed hospitals that felt welcoming instead of frightening. Rowan discovered that, beneath Celine's confident leadership lived a frightened daughter still chasing approval from a father who had never believed kindness belonged in business. Their conversations remained simple, unfolding during sunny afternoons in parks, libraries, and community gardens where expensive titles no longer mattered. They spoke not as a billionaire executive and a struggling carpenter but as two weary people searching for reasons to believe tomorrow could become gentler than yesterday. Life, however, tested them once more. Rowan lost his construction job after the company reduced staff during financial difficulties. The apartment owner issued a final eviction notice. Rowan quietly packed boxes after Orion fell asleep, hiding tears he refused to let his son witness. Pride prevented him from asking Celine for help because he feared becoming another responsibility she felt obligated to rescue. At the same time, Celine's company faced a hostile takeover attempt engineered by investors who viewed compassion as weakness. Board members pressured her to abandon charitable programs, including the community center where she had first rediscovered hope. Everything seemed ready to collapse until ordinary people unexpectedly stepped forward. Families Rowan had once helped organized support,